charge. It's called Recovery Day, an annual event in Winnipeg where hundreds of attendees celebrate getting clean and sober. Global's Catherine Dornian brings us more on how the event aims to provide support and destigmatize addiction.
With games, live music, and kids' activities, it was a lively afternoon at the Forks as Winnipeggers came together for Recovery Day. Ian Rabb, co-chair of the event, says it's not often that those in recovery can gather in a celebratory environment.
I've lost 45 people a year over the last few years of families and people I've worked with in addiction. So it usually is the sad stories.
But he says today is about acknowledging the people who have made the difficult journey of recovering from drugs and alcohol. This year featured special guest Arnold McCuller, a singer who's performed with the likes of James Taylor and Phil Collins. He's 39 years into recovery and says getting clean made it possible for him to share important moments with his parents before they passed.
I kissed him on the forehead and I shaved his face and I told him, you can let go, it's time to go, let go. The following morning, after I left his bedside, he passed away. I showed up for my dad.
Moments he likely would have missed in the throes of his addiction. Rabb says family and support networks are critical for those struggling, which is why today is a family-friendly event.
Recovery is a disease where people feel very isolated, and families feel very isolated, and they don't know where to turn to get help and move for help. So if we can break the stigmas in families, people will be more outspoken.
Rabb hopes dismantling the stigma will make people more comfortable about sharing their stories and advocating for better addictions care in Manitoba.
We do not have an absolute positive continuum of care yet, where people that access one clinic can't get a bed or can't get detox.
For those just beginning their journey, the resource tent had plenty of literature and pamphlets to get people started. And maybe most critically, they could find support and encouragement from those who have been in their shoes.
And I can't express it enough that if you're new, just keep coming.
Hopefully making a difficult process easier, knowing that success is possible. Catherine Dornian, Global News.
What if you could find out your risk of cancer before it ever shows up? That's what a new AI-powered mammogram can do with near-perfect accuracy, and it's just been approved by Health Canada. Naomi Barguil has more on that.
An AI-powered mammogram that can detect the risk of breast cancer before it even appears has been approved by Health Canada. It's called Profound Risk, founded by an American company called iCAD. The technology can assess the risk of cancer 1 to 2 years ahead of time, even when a current mammogram shows no evidence of the disease. Founder and CEO of iCAD, Dana Brown, says the technology's findings can dramatically change someone's care path.
The peace of mind that this technology can give both the patient and the provider to be on the right path for the next 2 years and be very vigilant about it, I think is just amazing.
Breast cancer accounts for 13% of all cancer deaths in women in Canada. Radiologist Mark Trail has been using the technology in Michigan for 5 years. He says seeing it in action has proven to him how much more capable AI is than humans in picking out cancer on a mammogram.
It shows me this small malignancy that I may or may not have seen. So my net performance in finding cancer has increased.
The AI-supported mammogram has been cleared for use in both Canada and the European Union. It's expected to officially become available to Canadians in 1 to 2 years. Naomi Barguil, Global News.
The cost of inflation continues to push grocery bills to totals not seen in a long time. However, this weekend in Calgary, an annual event is giving some relief to local families and their wallets. And as Craig Momney tells us, it's helping people fill their fridges for a fraction of the price.
It was a team effort, but the Calvert family was up for the challenge to try and squeeze all of this produce and themselves into one van.
I got a case of apples, case of oranges, case of tomatoes, 2 cases of mangoes, and then we got a few little things like bananas and peaches and whatnot.
For all of that, it cost her about $150, a total she estimates would have been double at the store. Angela says with inflation and the cost to feed a family of 5, she's seeing an extra $200 on her grocery receipts.
It was a big relief. This is hopefully going to last us about 3 weeks if I cook some of it and keep it in the fridge.
This is the annual harvest sale at the BMO Centre, where families can get produce at a fraction of the cost.
Really, the whole goal is to have an accessible sale that offers produce at rock bottom prices.
For instance, this bag of apples was just $4. And these honeydew melons, just $2 a piece.
Essentially, it makes them feel like they're stealing or that they're getting a deal. It's too good to be true, but that's what we want. Secretly, selfishly, we're also convincing everybody that produce is awesome. It's good to eat. Everybody can also buy a larger selection than maybe they traditionally would.
Everything is donated from producers across Canada and the U.S. About 70% of the sales will benefit the Alberta Children's Hospital and the Community Kitchens program of Calgary, while shoppers benefit by filling their fridges. Shoppers like Elena Rhodes and her friend, who expected to pay somewhere in the ballpark of $300 for all of this, but instead, just under $200.
I really thought it would be more. It's just so expensive to buy produce these days in the store.
While all of this cost Carrie Kloss just over $250.
When you're trying to raise a family, trying to do it a little bit healthy, this really does help because we have the means to preserve the food and preserve it knowing what we're putting in it. That's a lot.
With the trunk able to close, the only challenge now for Elena Calvert is where to put it all when she gets home.
We're going to use a little extra counter space for a while, but we'll get creative in the fridge and do some Tetris.
Craig Momney, Global News.
If you were around back then, everyone remembers where they were on September 11th, including a 5th grader who remembers that day vividly. Her dad responded with so many of his FDNY brothers and sisters. Now, he survived the attacks but died from a 9/11 related illness in 2016. And now she's documenting advocates of the Zadroga Act to expand health care for first responders with a project titled DUST. Andrew Siff has that story.
As a 5th grader in Marine Park, Brooklyn, Bridget Gormley's school day on September 11th, 2001 was surreal.
Kids kept getting pulled out of school, pulled out of school, pulled out of school all day. The population was very blue collar, cops, firemen, sanitation. So all these kids' parents were likely here.
Bridget's dad, Billy, out of Ladder Company 174, had responded with so many of his FDNY brothers and sisters to the 9/11 attacks.
My mother picked me up and she said, I asked her, what's happening, what's going on? She told me, and she's like, Daddy's okay. So it was, this happened, he's okay.
A relieved little girl, but as she went home from school, a realization something was not okay.
There were papers flying all over the sky, and we were grabbing them out of the sky and putting them in bags.
4 years later, a warning sign.
2005, I think, is when we started seeing people get really sick.
And a decade after that, the aftershock.
In 2016, December, he was diagnosed with bladder cancer, and then he passed away the following June.
Bridget and her 3 brothers and their mom devastated, and she realized.
If I didn't know, as the daughter of a first responder who her parent got sick and died, nobody knows.
Bridget Gormley began traveling with John Feel and advocates of the Zadroga Act to expand health care for first responders. Jon Stewart credited with convincing Congress.
They did their jobs. 18 years later, do yours.
Bridget recording all of it for a documentary film called Dust.
Thousands of people have become ill or died from causes related to the attacks.
Her takeaway from the project, the experts should have known better.
It doesn't really take rocket science to know how bad it was. I mean, when you hear what the composition of what was in that dust, benzene, lead, chromium, jet fuel, pulverized concrete, it was all these things alone are carcinogens, and then you mix them together and you cook them for 3 months. It can't be good.
Educating others now her life's mission. As the 22nd anniversary approaches, the new calculus, the impact of that day may reverberate for generations.
A resident that lived over here in Battery Park City who was a newborn and was exposed, they have to have their life covered to make sure that they don't ever have to bear the burden of financial medical expenses.
And 2 decades after that unforgettable day of school, Bridget thinks about it this way from the Memorial Glade, the grassy corner of the Trade Center site dedicated to those, like her dad, lost after 9/11.
I mean, if you look behind me, the glade is very subtle, and there's no names on it. If you were to put names on this entire square would be filled with people.